Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video I would like to talk about the problems and challenges of multi-crew gameplay in Star Citizen and discuss some possible solutions. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to our amazing patrons for their support of the channel and the Armory. Now, before we begin, I want to say that I don't want to talk about ship-to-ship combat balance for the most part, and definitely not about the ballistic changes in 3.18, so stand down with the angry essays in the comments, because we all know that CIG will come up with something even worse in the next patch anyway. What I do want to talk about is the balance of taking multiple single-seat ships versus one multi-crew ship, the issues and how they can be solved. In my experience, this problem is the most apparent with mining and more recently salvage, and less apparent in combat missions and bounties, so let's start there. Generally speaking, combat missions are somewhat easier to balance in terms of risk and reward. To create a mission that is more difficult and thus requires more players to complete, you simply have to increase difficulty, most likely by adding more enemies or waves of reinforcements. Now, this does increase difficulty but doesn't exactly promote multi-crew gameplay, so let's focus on space combat missions for a moment, as ground combat doesn't quite apply here, even though you could argue that taking out the dropship to raid bunkers technically is multi-crew gameplay. But how do you incentivize multi-crew gameplay for space combat? Well, current ship weapon balance aside, you could just give the enemies ships that require multi-crew ships to take down. Now, while I have seen plenty of people take down an Idris with no big guns, I think the desired end state is that you would need a bomber or a ship like the Perseus for it to be an even fight. The same logic applies in reverse. If you know you're about to fight many small ships, it might be a better idea to put 6 people in a hammerhead rather than bring out 6 light fighters. And as far as profit of running a crew versus going on your own, in my experience it is more or less the same, because CIG figured out the right way to balance risk and reward for combat missions. So with this in mind, let's take a look at space mining. Currently you have 2 options for space mining, the Prospector and the Mole. A good Prospector pilot can make about 100,000 alpha UEC per hour mining and refining Quantanium. Now let's say that you operate the Mole with a skeleton crew of 3 people rather than 4. If you scale the expected income according to crew, it means you should be making 300,000 alpha UEC per hour. But this is not true in the game. Let's think about why. We are currently limited by the size of mineable rocks we find and the elements contained in them. Someone who is better at probability and statistics than me could probably tell you what is the most likely income based on probability of rocks spawning and the probability of elements in them. The supposed advantage of the Mole at the moment is that it has more storage and more powerful mining hardware. But none of this matters if you focus on mining Quantanium, which is the way to make large sums of money. Because once you extract Quantanium, you have no choice but to return to a refinery to prevent an explosion, even though you haven't filled all your cargo capacity, which in theory limits your max income per hour. So how can this be fixed? Well, the core issue here is missing gameplay. There was an attempt to mitigate this when the Mole was released. They added mineable rocks that needed multiple lasers to crack. This actually worked for a while. But eventually this was made obsolete by balance changes to mining lasers, and it was still more profitable to take multiple prospectors over one Mole. So this won't work, for now. Eventually there will be large-scale minables only accessible to larger mining ships like the Orion, which is a ship that simply requires multiple crew members because of how it operates, but that actually offers other solutions. The reason the Orion requires multiple crew members is simply because rather than being a mining ship, it's a mining platform that includes refining and processing. So there's no need to run back to a station to refine what you mined, and since you're refining right away, you're not losing any income to decay. From this we can see that a very valid solution would be to implement refining and allow us to use refinery ships like the Expanse or the Galaxy to increase our profits. Now, would this fix the imbalance in profits? Well, it's difficult to say, but I think it potentially could. But there's a lot of missing technology that's required, so I don't think we will see it soon. So let's take a look at some quicker solutions. The quickest, dirtiest solution I can think of is making Quantanium not decay when mined by the Mole. This solution would definitely make people flock to it, but it's only temporary and would probably upset the balance way too much. A more reasonable solution would be to make the saddlebags detachable and replaceable. This would allow miners to bring a cargo ship along that would carry the volatile ore back to a refinery. This increases the time spent mining by removing the need for the mining ship to go back and thus increasing the profit. And more importantly, it would bring us closer to refining gameplay as detachable saddlebags are a prerequisite. Now, as some of you may have guessed from my very long explanation of how to solve the profit problem with mining, there's no single or simple solution to the multi-crew issue in general. And also, profit is not the only problem killing multi-crew. Combined with engagement and entertainment, it creates an environment where multi-crew cannot thrive. Not many captains want to hire crew because of the low profits, and not many people want to be crew because the pay is usually less than if they were mining or doing missions on their own, and generally speaking, not many people want to just sit in a turret waiting for something to happen. Also, many captains believe that NPC crews will solve their problems as they will be cheaper and offer generally the same ability as a human crew, which is unlikely because of CIG's stance on multi-crew, and it is questionable as to when we will get NPC crews in the first place. Now, creating a good multiplayer experience is difficult, and balancing it even more so. So what global measures can CIG implement to encourage multi-crew gameplay? Well, as mentioned before, adding missions and events that promote playing as a group is a very good first step, and many MMOs do this with dungeons and raids and similar activities. Also, some better party features could be nice as well. Party launch works great most of the time, but I would like if the in-game comms menu highlighted members of my org as to improve party creation. Also, in-game comms could use another look, as at the moment I know very few groups that actually use it. But quite frankly, there will be boring aspects of multi-crew gameplay like manning turrets or stacking boxes and salvage ships. As players, we will have to accept this. But eventually there will be additional crew roles that will need to be done between encounters to break the boredom. But I also think that CIG will need to reconsider their stance on forcing players to group together for generic and low-risk tasks like cargo running and secure space. On the vast majority of such cargo runs, nothing will happen, so nobody will want to man the turrets for you because it's boring. So it would make more sense to just hire NPC crews, but if CIG make them useless if something happens, most captains will just place their bets and run without crew, hoping that their profits will be higher than losses if something happens, which would go directly against what CIG want, because it breaks the risk versus reward balance. So they could make NPC crews competitive with humans, at least in terms of manning turrets or automating them with AI blades. I mean, generally speaking, I think that automated turrets even around stations should be insanely accurate, but that's a topic I have planned for another video. Another thing I have seen players mention is that they would prefer to man multi-crew ships with NPCs and have their friends join them in single-seat ships or in ships also manned by NPCs, which I think is also a very valid solution, at least to the engagement problem. Though I imagine that an NPC crewed galaxy accompanied by a couple of prospectors could make a very decent profit as well. With that being said, that's it for tonight. What do you think? Do you enjoy multi-crew gameplay? How could CIG improve it? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.